Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to this video for the Free Motion Quilting Project. Today I want to change things up a bit. We have been working so far in the black hull cloth version of Express Your Love, and I've been fixing some of those issues. I've been stitching out many different designs in orange thread, trying to fill up those orange sections, but there's still another issue that needs to be solved, and that is the words. The sections where there are words, kind of her breath. I looked at that for a long time and I realized I just really didn't like the feel of it. I didn't like how things were going. It wasn't, the words weren't very visible to me, and I couldn't stand back and read them, and that means that the effect of the quilt was being lost, at least for me. It's one of those things, really kind of, you have to look at a quilt and ask yourself how you feel about it. You might love my quilt exactly how it is, but I promise you, this is always going to be an individual thing, an individual journey, and asking yourself and listening to yourself when you don't like something is very, very important. You know, you have to respect your own opinions, and that part always bothered me. And so, kind of worked out really well because this is perfect timing to teach you an awesome technique created by my friend Nina Paley, and this technique is called Trapplique. And basically it is a combination of trapunto, which is the technique of adding extra layer of batting, making your quilt more puffy, and applique, which is of course adding a shape, a fabric shape to your quilt on the surface, either turning the edges under or zigzagging the shape on the surface. And so trapunto and applique becomes trapplique. And it's an awesome technique for adding another layer to your quilt and also, of course, covering up a mistake. This is a mistake that I made and I'm covering it up using this technique, and it's going to work wonderfully. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, how many layers are we talking here? Basically, this technique, and the reason I love it so much, is it challenges the idea of what a quilt is. If you've ever shown a quilt, if you've ever entered your local guild show, you know that there's a simple rule for what a quilt is, and that is 3 layers, a backing fabric, a batting, and a quilt top. Just 3 layers. It does not have to be pieced in order to be considered a quilt. A quilt is just simply 3 layers of cloth held together, and the second rule is it has to have stitching that goes through all 3 layers, through the top, batting, and backing. And I once knew a quilter in a guild who had a quilt rejected because she put a false back on a quilt. It had stitching through all 3 layers, but because of the false back, the judges couldn't see the stitches on the back of the quilt, so it was rejected. So that is really the rule of a quilt: 3 layers, stitching through all 3 layers. Well, there is no rule that says a quilt can't be more than that. A quilt can't be 5 layers or 7 layers. And so that's why I love this technique so much, is it's adding more layers, it's adding more puff and more density and intensity to the quilt. It's also basically having it physically stand out more, and I really like that. I think it makes the quilt even more interesting, and you want to touch it that much more, I think. Now, the one thing about this, we are going to be making these shapes and then zigzagging them on the surface, and the zigzag is going to show up on the back of the quilt, and that might be something that really, really bothers you. But I'm going to tell you straight up, this is something that I'm having to really work with myself with over the last couple of years, and that is the back is the back, and it is okay if it does not look good. I got really stuck in a mentality of making double-sided quilts, meaning the back had to look just as good as the front. And that can really make you crazy. It can make you as crazy as ripping out tons and tons of stitching, as being so focused on perfection that you stop quilting because you're ripping everything out that's not just absolutely perfect. I see it every time I show my quilts. Every time I show up somewhere and talk, every time I have a quilt with me, first a quilter looks at the front, they flip it over on the back and take a look at the back. It's like we all do it. It's like a magic trick. We want to see what those stitches look like on the back. We want to know how the quilter did that. And it's one of those things where you kind of just have to say, there's zigzagging on the back and it's going to be okay. I'm having to step back and say, well, the zigzagging helps me be able to make this technique and fix this issue, and no other way would solve this. So I'm willing to take and accept one thing for another. And you might be sitting here going, well, what does it matter? It's the back. And if you're in that mentality, I love you. But for those of us that are so anal about it, you know what I mean. Just that kind of cringing feeling. We want the front to look just as good as the back. We want the back to look just as good as the front. With this particular technique, you're going to just have to bite the bullet and accept the satin stitching on both sides. And just hope that it's going to look good. So long as you use the right settings on your machine, it's going to look great. So, alright, enough gabbing. How do we do this? Basically, this is going to be multi-step videos. I can't teach all of this in one day. So here's the first step. I went and marked out all of the breadth sections from the master pattern. You print out and download the free pattern, and then tape all the pieces together, and then you have the master. And so I took this fabric and laid it over my light box and marked out these sections. And I'm just marking the outlines. I'm just wanting those laid out. Anything that is touching, so like these two pieces were touching each other, and I decided to use them in the same fabric color, I just went on ahead and marked them together and stitched them together. They'll be one unit. I'm not going to cut them apart and then put them back together again. They were already touching. They're in the same fabric. They need to just go on ahead and be quilted together. So I marked the fabric. I layered it with just a layer of batting. Just one layer of batting here. And I am using Quilter's Dream polyester batting in the deluxe thickness. This is the thickest loft. So I'm going to get a nice loft from this. Now here's the cool thing about Trapplique. With Trapunto, you don't get puff and stitching. You get the puff and you get basically an empty space of puffier quilting. With Trapplique, you're getting a puffier space, but you can also add more texture and more quilting to this. And let me show you this on this other camera. So you can see I've stitched through here with these undulating lines, and it's going to add that much more texture. We're covering up those words and we're making the texture more simplistic on the surface of the quilt, and that's my goal more than anything else. So let me show you exactly how this is going to work. You can see my outline here, and all I'm going to do is get started stitching right here on the corner, pull up my bobbin thread. And the nice thing about this is it's pretty forgiving. You're just stitching this particular shape. You're not really worried about all this excess on the outside. You just want to stitch on the marked line first. Do your outline. And I'm taking a wide camera angle with this today because I want you to see my hands moving. I want you to see this marked line. This is not really a design that we're learning so much as a technique. Now, when it comes to stitching on a marked line, this is going to feel totally different from stitching a free-form design. And the reason is you're basically tracing. It's the difference between drawing something fresh and tracing. And the best advice I have is just go slowly and carefully, and if you need to, bring your hands closer to the needle, but of course watch the needle. Don't get your fingers under there. Just make sure that you are stitching slowly and carefully, and you'll maintain that control. And if you stitch off, like if I stitch off like that, it is no big deal. I'm going to cut that off when we cut this out. So it's no big deal if you stitch off the line. Otherwise I wouldn't have done that. Take out all these pins. And the cool thing is, like I said, you can add more texture to this. You don't have to do these straight wiggly lines, or slightly curving lines if you didn't want to. You could really do anything in here. You could add another design. You could do basic spiral, whatever you wanted to do. Now I'm going to mark a single line because I really want this flow. You can see this one down here and this one way up here. It's kind of, the lines are all flowing in this direction, and I just want to make sure that I maintain that nice flow, because all these are going to go on the quilt and need to make sense. And I'm just going to go down and stitch on that line. And now all I'm going to do is just travel stitch and echo it. Pull having trouble with my machine liking that direction today. So I know to rotate before going too long. You gotta get to know those little finicky bits of your machine. If it doesn't like a certain direction, just stop and rotate. Nice thing about Trapplique and working with these shapes is, let's say you had an applique quilt and you made a mistake and there was a problem with one of the appliques. Maybe it became loose, or maybe you stitched something in it and you didn't like it, or you just decided halfway through the quilt you didn't like that fabric color. I mean, how many times does that happen? And you're just looking at it and really disappointed with it. Well, pick another fabric and layer it with one layer batting, and then stitch a design that you like, or pick a fabric color that you like, and then you can trapplique it on the surface and fix that problem. Easy peasy. I intentionally chose a very, very simple quilting design for this because I really wanted this to be kind of a speedy fix, and I also wanted it to be very simple to kind of take a lot of the chaos out of my quilts. I also am trying one other thing. You might have noticed that my fabric is not 100% cotton. I am trying really two things at once. I am using some silk fabric that I found at the local fabric store here and challenging myself to go beyond cotton. And that's the really nice thing. Trapplique can use more materials, not just 100% cotton fabric. You can start playing with some different weirder fabrics and see what happens. Okay, one more. And don't worry too much if things aren't perfect, if your lines, if your design isn't absolutely perfect all the way to the edge. Like I said, this edge is going to get cut off. Okay, I'm just going to stitch off a bit. And that's the one time that I will use that thread cutter to break my thread, because I do not need to hide them in this situation. Okay. So what do I do at this point? I'm going to take my scissors and carefully cut out. First I roughly cut out the shape. I'm going to do this with all of them, but I'll show you this one. Okay. Then I'm going to just cut right on the edge. I don't want to really cut through that outline stitching, but I do want the shape to be the shape that I outlined. So I'm just cutting right along it. If I slice through the stitching, it's really not that big of a deal. Like I said, we're going to zigzag this down and secure it with a satin stitch. So this is going to be more than secured. All these edges are going to be taken care of. No big deal. And like I said, that little mistake right there, I just cut it off. Don't worry about stitching off the line. If you stitch to the outside, it's no big deal. You can just cut it off. So there we go. That is the piece ready to be trappliqued. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you'll get on your machine and give this first step of trapplique a try. Might not all make sense in your head yet. We've only learned half of the design, so be patient. And definitely check out the next video coming up soon on the Free Motion Quilting Project. Find all of this and more, many videos, stitching out Express Your Love, making mistakes and fixing them at freemotionproject.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.